Hello, this is your brain on drugs and this is punk rock psychiatrist. This is a special episode. It's the first episode I'm doing that's an update of a previous episode. Um, it just so happens that the update is of the last episode that I released on breastfeeding and antidepressants. I've actually been doing some other work looking into breastfeeding on other medications, and I actually stumbled across a mistake, several mistakes actually, that I made in the last episode, and I wanted to go over those. So at the end of the episode, when I was talking about, I guess it was more in the middle, when I was talking about the new rating system of L1 through L5, and I gave examples of medications in different psychiatric medication classes, and went through all of the antidepressants, um, and saying where they fell on that rating system. I was, like I said, I was looking at antipsychotics, and I had actually seen that some of the medications that I had thought were in one place had actually been moved, and then I noticed that there were actually several medications that had been moved. And so when I put that information together, it was a couple years ago, and it looks like there have been a lot of updates that I guess I didn't catch before I put that episode out. So I just wanted to go over those so that you don't have false information. Some of these changes don't make a big difference in what I would do, but a couple of them actually make a pretty significant difference. And so I think it's important that we go over these. And the other thing was, I actually found several medications that I didn't know what their rating was, and I was able to find it. So these results of are in a published manual that is only available through purchase. But I was able to find several sources that cited that resource without purchasing it myself, and then I was able to find a way of going on the website of where they're published to verify that, in fact, those other papers had been correct with what they had said, and I was able to find out what those ratings were without the further details. But if you go to that Hale rating system that I had previously mentioned, the Dr. Thomas Hale's Medications in Mother's Milk infant rating system, that's where the L1 through L5. And just for a brief review, L1 is considered like gold standard, most safe. L2 is um, safe, very remote risk of harm, limited studies suggesting anything else. L3 being moderately safe, likely no studies really been done, but no reason to think that there's anything wrong with them. L4 is possibly hazardous, so the recommendation, I would say L1 through L3 are all good to go. And if you had a choice between 1, 2, and 3, of course, you would go with 1 over 2 and 2 over 3, um, unless there was a clinical reason. If there was a substantial clinical reason to pick a 2 over a 1, then you would pick the 2 over 1. Say you had someone who had taken the L1 medication in the past, didn't do well on it, um, and the L2 was working well, I wouldn't change it because they were breastfeeding. That sort of example, right? So L4 is possibly hazardous. That's one where you could use the medication if there's really no other good options. This is an example where, you know, say lithium is L4, but at the same time, you don't have to breastfeed if you're taking one of these. But that decision could be still made to breastfeed. Just you would want to kind of weigh the cost and benefits, going to be a little bit more in depth there. Like, well, we really need this L4 med, and so it may still be okay to breastfeed because it's not an L5. L5 is contraindicated. The risks outweigh the benefit. Definitely don't do L5. All right, and thankfully there aren't that many L5s, and the L5 list didn't change, so there's no new L5s on the list that I found. Um, so let's go ahead and review what we did before, and I'm going to tell you what's different. One thing is sertraline's no longer L1. So I had previously had sertraline as L1. It's been moved to L2. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why that is. It's still recommended to use sertraline first line. So within the L2s, the order that I had went over before, where it's like sertraline, paroxetine, um, fluoxetine, escitalopram, citalopram, duloxetine, mirtazapine, kind of that list that I went over of what I would do. I'm not changing that. On the antidepressants. Now, some of the other medications for classes, it looks like there are some changes that are pretty substantial, but we haven't covered those drug classes yet. So I will insert the new information I have into those lectures. And when we get to mood stabilizers and antipsychotics, you will have the most up to date information when we talk about breastfeeding. But for antidepressants, I pretty much wouldn't change the order I would go in. But just so you're aware, sertraline is not L1, it's L2. Also in L2, fluoxetine, which we knew. And it doesn't appear that this distinction is being made now between it being an L2 for over a month, or like L3 for neonates and L2 for everyone else. I didn't see that distinction. It seems like fluoxetine is now just kind of straight rated as an L2, so you can rest more assured to use fluoxetine, even in the neonate. And remember, L3 is not bad. Okay, L3 is still acceptable. So fluoxetine L2, paroxetine's there, fluvoxamine, trazodone, and then it looks like citalopram and escitalopram were moved from L3 to L2. So they and one reason this could be is, more time has passed and more people have used these meds, and it's more evident that they're safe. And so they've been moved up to L2. Venlafaxine was moved from L3 to L2. And interestingly, brexanolone and zuranolone are L2. And what I had previously told you in that lecture when I talked about brexanolone and zuranolone was that breastfeeding was contraindicated. Well, I've not only did I notice that they're L2, I also looked up the package inserts on those, and it no longer says that they are contraindicated. I swear it did at some point. That's why I put it in there. But it seems now that what they're saying is, although it hasn't been studied and they don't have necessarily evidence that it's super safe, it's very little of it gets into the breast milk. Therefore, the and kind of the harm that could come from it, the theoretical harm would be low. And then because such a small amount goes into the breast milk, that even though it hasn't really, we don't really have many case reports, if any, since these are brand new medications, they're saying it's probably pretty good to go. And the Hale system has put it into L2. So um, I previously said, pump and dump when you're on brexanolone, zuranolone. It's a short treatment course. But it appears, yes, you can breastfeed on these now, L2. All right, so that's actually that would be the biggest change in the antidepressant department. Not that these are medications are used that often, but that would be the biggest change, to go from contraindicated. And I didn't even know what their rating was, and I can now tell you that it's L2. For anxiolytics, I had mentioned quazepam. I couldn't even find quazepam on the list. It wasn't even listed this time. I've left it in L2 because I had previously seen that it was there. Quazepam's not a medication that is found a whole lot in the United States. I don't know if it's used at all. But luckily, we do have some others that have been added to the L2. So we've got oxazepam, and there's actually a lot of good things to say about oxazepam. We'll talk more about that in the anxiolytic lecture. Midazolam, that's more of a sedative than it is anxiolytic, but it is a benzodiazepine. But for procedures, so nice to know, midazolam L2. And then buspirone has been moved from L2 to L3 to L2. Hydroxyzine, which I previously did not know what a rating was for it, it's L2. And gabapentin, I previously didn't know what its rating was, and it's L2. And I put it in the anxiolytic category because I couldn't kind of think of where else to put it. We use it as an anxiolytic sometimes. We use it for sleep sometimes. We use it for alcohol abuse sometimes. But L2 for gabapentin. Pregabalin, actually, I didn't even include it on my slides, but it was L3. Mood stabilizers. This one changed quite a bit. So we still have carbamazepine, but valproic acid is no longer listed in L2. It's actually moved to L4. So that's a big change. So brexanolone and zuranolone going from kind of contraindicated to L2 is a big change. And then valproic acid going down to L4. Valproic acid's had a pretty big fall in the last couple of years. When it was found that it could kind of cause harm to sperm in addition to The egg as well. So even men taking it when you're conceiving, causing a problem. Valproic acid in many countries, especially in Europe, you're not even allowed to use valproic acid at all for females of reproductive age. Like that's a pretty big deal. Females of reproductive age at all. And I mean, this is a medication that's used for seizures. It's a medication that's used for um, migraine prophylaxis as well. And so to completely take that off the table, and I know in the States you can still use it, but the warnings have gone way up on it, way up. And I mean, I don't start women of reproductive age on valproic acid. I wouldn't start a woman on something that I would not, if it's a medication I would not want them to get pregnant on, I would not start them on it um, if they were of reproductive age, because half of pregnancies are unplanned. You never know when it's going to happen. You don't want them to be on something that could cause damage, especially something like valproic acid. And remember, valproic acid is a big no-no for pregnancy, but for breastfeeding, I had said it was L2. Well, apparently it's been moved to L4. I'm not sure why, but it has. Lamotrigine has moved up from L3 to L2, so that's good. Um, and then from the antipsychotics, there's quite a few changes here. So olanzapine still L2, haloperidol, it dropped. I believe. Let's see, it dropped to L2, or sorry, L3, and then we have three new ones. Risperidone moved from L3 to L2, and then interestingly, quetiapine and ziprasidone have moved up from L4 to L2. And remember when I was talking about these before, I was like, that I was kind of surprised that quetiapine and ziprasidone were in L4. I was like, wow, I mean, maybe L3, but L4, that's strange. And quetiapine is kind of known to be the antipsychotic that passes the least amount into the breast milk. So it was like, if this is, this one crosses the least, why is it L4? Just for like a tiny bit of sedation when it's not even in the milk? Well, it's now been moved up to L2. So I agree with this move. I don't know why it was L4 in the first place. I don't know if I had made a mistake at some point, but I had it in the L4 category. It is L2. So now we actually have four good L2 choices of second generation antipsychotics. And then I didn't mention these before: stimulants, methylphenidates L2, and hypnotics, Zaloplan Sonata, not often used L2, and Zopiclone, which we don't have in the US, but S-Zopiclone, Lunesta we do, is L2. So interesting, S-Zopiclone was not listed with any rating, but Zopiclone was listed as L2, so I don't know if that means we can infer S-Zopiclone as well. So going through L3, there's some additions to the list. Vortioxetine we had before, mirtazapine we had before, meprodoline we had before, but there are a whole bunch of new ones that I didn't know what their rating was, and it's good to know that these are L3. L3 is pretty good. Duloxetine. And remember, I had said, I had actually said I don't know why duloxetine's not on this list. I know that it's a pretty good option for breastfeeding. So duloxetine, we now know L3. Desvenlafaxine, milnacipran, levomilnacipran, vilazodone, esketamine, which I think I had previously mentioned, had said it was contraindicated. Appears that's no longer the case. It's L3. And then the newest one, gepirone, L3. Okay. Buspirone is L2, but gepirone L3. Bupropion we talked about was L3. And prazosin, just I didn't know what prazosin's rating was before use for nightmares. That's L3. We mentioned all the benzodiazepines not listed under L2 are L3. And then some of the sedative hypnotics, zolpidem's L3, melatonin. Interestingly, melatonin L3. Ramelteon L3, and suvorexant. That's one of the newer ones, L3. And then I believe limborexant didn't have a rating in, was it Darbarus? Sorry, the other one, the other orexin medication, the other Dora. I believe it was L3. I didn't put it on here. The one that starts with a D, Dari for orexin or something like that. And then looking at the antipsychotics, we had already mentioned aripiprazole and clozapine is L3, but I have a whole bunch more meds to add to that list. Paliperidone, acenapine, iloperidone, lorazepam, brexpiprazole, and then I think I had mentioned the first generations before: chlorpromazine, fluphenazine, perfenazine, and then haloperidol, which was L2, is now L3. Um, and then uh, some stimulants, L3s. So we had methylphenidate was L2, but dextroamphetamine, lisdexamphetamine, dexmethylphenidate, and modafinil and armodafinil are L3. All right. So all the ones I've mentioned so far are good to go. And we talked about which the big movers were. We had the fall of valproic acid into kind of a possibly hazardous category. And we had the rise of ziprasidone and quetiapine from that category to L2. So there were some minor moves in there, and then there were a couple of big, a couple of L3s to L2s, L2s to L3s, small moves, but those L2 to L4 moves, those are the ones I'm most interested in. I'm most interested in that. And then the additions to the list, the ones that I wasn't that they had not been given a rating at the last time I had looked into this, and now they are in the list. So kind of have that confidence that okay, duloxetine good, disvenlafaxine, levodopa, milnacipran, vilazodone, esketamine, gepirone. Now kind of knowing that those antidepressants are L3, they have a rating. You can feel a little bit more safe about it, even though there aren't isn't that much experience with them. Because once again, if you're picking a new medication, you're going to pick something that's in that top list. But if you've got a patient that's already on something and they want to know if they can breastfeed and continue to take the medication that's working for them, if it's in the L3 category, I'm going to give the thumbs up for that. Okay, so you've got a patient that they were on levodopa. It's a newer med. We don't know as much about it. Do we need to switch it? No, we don't switch when people get pregnant unless it's a big deal, like a valproic acid type of situation. And even then, like you really need to switch before they get pregnant because a lot of the damage is done early before one knows that they are pregnant. Um, that's why we don't want to give medications that are that dangerous to people who could become pregnant. Um, and then, but to know, okay, yeah, we can go ahead and continue these. No, we at least know that we have better information that they are safe now. And then looking at L4, we had talked about nifazodone before. And then I actually, Auvelity, dextromethorphan bupropion, not sure why, but it's been put in the L4 category. So that's a newer one that we might want to be more cautious with. Lithium, we had talked before in L4. Valproic acid, I've already mentioned, moved down to L4. And then um, one change to the antipsychotics, I had mentioned loxapine, pimozide, thioridazine, theothixine, and trifluoperazine before, but cariprazine is L4. Not sure why. It's kind of similar meds. Aripiprazole and Bexpiprazole are L3, but for some reason, cariprazine has been placed in the L4 category. So if you're picking something, you probably would not want to pick cariprazine since it's L4. If they're already on it, that's another story. Um, that gets a little trickier. But we're not talking about antipsychotics in depth now, so we'll go into that when we get to those. And then the stimulants atomoxetine, Strattera, interestingly, is L4, and phentermine, weight loss medication, L4. And I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe like intuitive guanfacine, not a lot of adults are on that. I believe that was L3. Um, and then L5, our list hasn't changed. Doxepin and Kava Kava. Those are the two I mentioned before that were L5. So, I just want to apologize that I didn't, it's tough putting together this material. It's a lot of material. I've got, 462 slides currently on the depression lecture. Um, I've got hundreds of slides on every other lecture series that I'm going to go through. These things change day to day, minute to minute. It's hard to keep up with it. Um, it's not necessarily that some announcement comes down and I get a hold of it immediately and I can go run in here and address this. It's kind of, I have to look these things up fresh every so often and notice, I remember before fluoxetine had a QTC prolongation risk that was in like the low category or something, or moderate, and it moved up to high. And I was like, what happened here? And there's no announcement of this. There's no explanation for it. It's not even listed as if a change has been made. It's just that I had I record this information in a snapshot in my material, and then I notice, oh, it's not the same recommendation as it was before. That's interesting. Um, I wonder what happened. Well, I guess I'll update it and I'll see if I can find if there was some sort of report that came out that would have led to this. Sometimes you see that, sometimes you don't, and sometimes I just don't know where the heck it came from. And so, and then sometimes it'll go back. So it can be difficult to keep up with this, but a lot of big changes in here that are pretty important. So, and I mean, we're talking about breastfeeding. We're talking about safety of a baby that's nursing. I definitely want to make sure that I don't have the impression out there that something's an L2 when it's actually an L4, and I don't want to steer you away from something that's L4 when it's actually L2. So I wanted to make sure that I had this little add-on bonus episode um, to go through that. But just kind of to reiterate, everything I said about antidepressants and the order I'd go in and why, none of this really changed that. I'm not surprised that some of the ones that moved up to L2, I felt pretty darn safe about Lexapro already, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I was going to use it anyway, um, and so I feel pretty okay about that. Um, Even though sertraline moved down from L1, it's still recommended to be the first choice. So, um, I don't prescribe Rexanolone and Zuranolone. I guess if I did, it would be good to know that that's not contraindicated anymore. The S-ketamine, I don't prescribe that either. But if you did, that would be good to know that it's like not contraindicated. It actually is L3. So those are some potentially, if you're someone who's prescribing that, and if you were kind of like, oh, I don't like that duloxetine and vilazodone are not on the list at all. Well, now that they're on the list and we have a rating for them, I even found a rating for St. John's wort, which we're going to talk about in a couple episodes from now, and it was L3. So um, it's good to know, and I've given you the resource. So even though I'm telling you this, know that you could be listening to it's May 2025. You could be listening to this 3-4 years from now, and what I'm telling you right now here in May in 2025 may not still be the case. And if I find out that new information just like I did today, I will go ahead and get that out to you. But it's tough. I mean, I don't go through the material checking it um, in real time every single day to see if there's a change. Uh, I keep up with the newest literature, and when new stuff comes out and it changes, that I take note of that. But when these tiny little changes happen to little manuals that like don't get a lot of publicity, something, every time a new beers list comes out, I review it. I see if there's anything different. A new one comes out every couple of years. I try to stay on top of that, things like that. But it's tough to do. It's tough to keep up to date on this stuff. And this is just an example of this is what I do. Like, I mean, almost full time. Like, try and keep up with this information. And I've even missed a bunch of stuff. So it is difficult, but I hope you enjoyed the whole series on reproductive psychiatry with antidepressants, and now that we have all the most up to date information on that, um, I'll be releasing in a couple days as scheduled the episode on hypogonadism. So thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.